Okay, next step is to cut the channels around the upper and lower sides of the guitar in order to fit this binding, which, as you inevitably will know, will sit in a little groove that runs along the edge and is visible from the front face of the guitar. It's for protection. It's also just for an aesthetic, really, just to make it look nice. So we'll be putting a little bit of that on. In order to achieve that, we've got our router and we've got a bearing on the top of the cutter there. So the bearing sits on the top of the cutting blade with just enough blade exposed, so as if we offer the binding up to it, it'll cut a channel which is around about the depth that we need for that. So what will happen in simple terms is I will stand up for this, but just for purposes of demonstration, the router will sit on the top of the guitar, the bearing will run around the outside edge, and as we move around it'll cut the channel to the correct depth, and then we just simply glue it in. So I won't bore you by showing you that, because there's plenty of videos on YouTube that will show you, and indeed it's relatively obvious. The main thing to make sure you do is to keep the cutter completely vertical and parallel 90 degrees to the face of the guitar as you bring it around. Try your darndest not to let it tip. If it tips, you'll be in all sorts of trouble. Incidentally, there are devices, sort of jig things, which will hold this in place, which you just offer the guitar into and spin it round. They're about 300 or 400 quid to buy, so I haven't got one. So we're going to just do it by hand. Be really, really careful, mindful as we do it, and all being well, we should get a good result. So we'll see how that goes. Right, so done that. We've cut the channel top and bottom using the router. Incidentally, it should be obvious, but I will mention it. Obviously, I've offered the binding in and marked a point along the side of the guitar, which allowed me to set the depth of cut as well as, sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier, the depth of cut on the height adjustment on the router, so we didn't go too deep. So we've done that, we've cut the channels. The only thing that you'll have to bear in mind also is that when you cut these channels in, don't allow the blade to run all the way around. Get as close to this heel as you can without actually reaching it, because if you do, inevitably you'll start digging in with the blade, digging into the side of the heel, which is going to be bad news. So make sure you stop short, and then the rest of that I'm going to take out with a chisel and a little saw, just to make good there. So we're going to glue this in, and there's a couple of ways in which we can glue it in. One is to use a solvent-based cement, or even super glue. Works relatively well. Super glue will actually melt the binding, this plastic binding that I'm using on this particular guitar. Will melt it very slightly, just the kind of substructure of it, which will actually cause it to kind of bond with the wood. It actually sort of seeps in to the wood and binds very nicely. So super glue is a very, very good thing to use. Or even just acetone. Acetone has exactly the same effect. Rub some acetone on there, and it will melt just the substructure of the plastic, and it'll melt the binding into the wood itself. That's going to look okay, I reckon. So there's the binding all glued in place. I elected to use the acetone technique at the end. It worked really quite well. So it's all been stuck down with binding tape, and then we'll scrape and clean that up. Look at that grain, isn't that going to be stunning, that wood? Beautiful.